Welcome back to Proxam, everybody, and today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different than what I had originally planned. What I had originally designed to actually give you guys today was a Ynnari video talking about my experiences over the last 3 weeks with the Ynnari. That's going to be coming out tomorrow, and I'm going to be talking about this today because I think it's pretty big news and it has a lot of implications for our faction. And that is the core rule changes that are coming up this Thursday in the balanced data slate have indeed been leaked. They have also been leaked by a decently credible source. Normally, if I just heard these rumors, I wouldn't make a video about it. I would just put it in the back of my mind and basically forget about it because, as you guys know, there's been so many rumors about so many different Warhammer-related stuff. It just gets lost in the background most of the time. However, this one stuck out to me because it was given to me by a pretty credible source, somebody who normally would not also share something unless they thought it was very credible. And because most of the changes on there are things that I have said myself on my channel over the last month. And yes, I do realize how that sounds, and trust me, I do agree that just because a leak kind of has mirrored what I've essentially said about what needs to be changed in the core rulebook doesn't necessarily make it more true or more credible. So do keep that in mind as we go forward. And without further ado, let us go ahead and jump right into it. But first, a quick overview of what we're going to be looking at in today's video. We're just going to be taking a look at the leak verbatim, and we're going to be looking at how the core rules leak will affect the Craftworld Eldar. Okay, so here it is in all its glory. The leak was a little bit bigger than this, but basically the rest of it was irrelevant to the Craftworld Eldar, so I just cut it out. It was essentially just, custode unit points costs and things like that. I think basically what the leak said is that custodes are going to get a slight points increase on a lot of their units, but are going to largely remain unchanged, something along those lines. And that there was going to be changes in a couple of units as far as their unit size and composition. So from what the leak says, apparently mortals no longer spill over. So that spillover damage that I've been complaining about and telling you guys about, how devastating wounds and high damage weapons aren't good for the game because mortal wounds are good against every target because mortal wounds spill over, right? Apparently, according to the leak, that is going to be a thing of the past. So if you have a D weapon, a Wraith Cannon, for example, that does D6 wounds, you're firing into Space Marine squad and you get a devastating wound proc, that model can only ever kill one model in the enemy unit, regardless of how many mortal wounds you end up doing. And that is on a per attack basis. So you can no longer kill more models than you have attacks. So if your weapon has 1 attack, you can kill 1 model. If your weapon has 2 attacks, you can kill 2 models, and so forth. Wounds will not carry over, which is great. It's something I've been saying on this channel for a while that they needed to fix, and I'm glad if this leak ends up being true, which it is credible, will happen. So I'm hoping that is the case. Okay, so the next leak is that you can only use free strats on battle tactic strats. So this doesn't really affect the Craftworld Eldar too much because we have a lot of specific abilities that affect certain stratagems like free Overwatch or free heroic intervention. They're, named specifically, but there are factions out there that don't name specifically stratagems. So you can basically just say, oh, I'm going to use this stratagem for free this turn and this stratagem for free the next turn. And apparently people were abusing this to get Overwatch 3 times or, get another stratagem in their army off 3 times in a single turn. So it was becoming a little bit oppressive, so this is a limit to that. Overwatch can now only be used on units you can draw line of sight to. So that means indirect fire weapons can no longer overwatch a target that's out of line of sight. And I also think this is a good change because it removes some of the uninteraction in the game from certain units. Yes, things like the D cannon will be affected, but things like Desolators will also be affected. And I don't know about you guys, but it was really annoying to move a unit up and then get shot by Desolators within 24 inches. And because they had so many shots, your unit of Howling Banshees or Striking Scorpions or whatever you had was just going to pretty much evaporate before it could do anything. So I'm glad they're actually getting rid of this, and this might give combat units that are a little bit on the, squishier side, like our combat units, a little bit more teeth in certain scenarios. Out of line of sight shooting is also apparently -1 to hit and -1 AP now, instead of -1 to hit and the benefit of cover. And this leak says it's not clear if that's on top of the current rule or not, but I doubt it because -1 to hit and then -1 to hit does not stack. So I think what it is just basically replacing indirect fire. And instead of giving the enemy unit the benefit of cover, it gives your weapons -1 AP, which means that your unit can also benefit from cover if it's already in it, which I think is a better interaction because it helps units survive longer against those types of weapons. So indirect fire is basically getting nerfed by this core rule change. And again, this helps squish your units out significantly because it just means that not only is the weapon not going to be getting any AP values, but you're most likely going to be in cover and you're getting a better armor save as well. Okay, so how is the core rules leak going to affect the Craftworld Eldar? So the Wraith Knight and D weapons are going to be much less powerful. Mortals don't spill over, so it won't be good against all targets on the battlefield. So it's going to be good against large targets with a lot of wounds, which it should be. It's just not going to be that good against light infantry, which it should have never been, right? D weapons have never been an anti-infantry weapon. And they really shouldn't be used that way, right? They should be used to take out large targets and other big threats on the battlefield. Indirect fire and presumably other out-of-line-of-sight shooting will be at -1 to hit and -1 AP. This means that support weapons, the Dark Reaper Exarch, and the Night Spinner will be hit by this nerf. And what this essentially means is that these indirect fire weapons are not going to hit as hard against armored targets. So they're going to be better against light targets, or they're going to just be better against targets that maybe aren't as tough, right? Maybe are a little bit easier to kill. So a D cannon firing out of line of sight against a Land Raider probably won't be able to do as much damage as it was before, even with a Strands dice. And that's assuming they don't touch Strands dice at all and they just leave it at this. Also, not being able to overwatch with indirect fire is going to hurt D cannons a lot. So I didn't think this was that big of a deal for things like the Night Spinner, because the Night Spinner really relies not on overwatch, but on hitting a target with its ability to prevent its movement and advance rolls. And the damage that it does is kind of a side thing, right? I mean, yes, it can do a lot of damage with guide, stuff like that, but it's more about the ability for the Night Spinner, at least for me and how I run it. I know that competitive players running the 2 Night Spinner combo and stuff like that were, basically abusing them for their devastating wounds, but I do think it's more of a utility piece, and it's definitely designed as a utility piece, so I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. But again, I could be wrong, and that could, affect competitive lists, God forbid, or whatever. So, it does affect us quite a bit. I think it mostly affects the D cannon, but might also affect things like the Night Spinner. As for the free stratagems being limited to battle tactic strats, that doesn't affect us whatsoever because most of our abilities are either just straight up gaining command points like the Autarch Wayleaper, or being able to, affect specific stratagems like Overwatch and Heroic Intervention. And these changes are probably going to be implemented alongside points nerfs to the most competitive units, and maybe some other unneeded ones as a punishment for GW's own mistakes. So I do think, unfortunately, that there might be some units that get nerfed that don't deserve a nerf and that actually aren't OP at all, and GW is basically just making sure that the Eldar don't continue to dominate tournament play. So what they'll probably do is nerf the most competitive units, and then they might do something a little bit sneaky, which is they'll look at the units that might replace those super competitive units, and they'll nerf them as well. And that's basically what I like to call the ass covering maneuver. So if the first round of nerfs to the highly competitive units don't work, which basically means that the tournament players look at the nerfs and they say, well, I'm going to find alternatives to how I build my list so my list can still be really competitive and still win tournaments. Those units which would have replaced the units that are nerfed, like for example, the Wraith Knight, instead of having a Wraith Knight, maybe you run something else instead of it. Those alternatives which fill that same role will also be nerfed. So that way you ensure that the tournament win rate doesn't actually exceed what you expect. And that's essentially what I expect out of this nerf. Not only are there going to be some core rule nerfs to kind of change things around a little bit and make certain things less oppressive, but there's going to be datasheet nerfs and points increases to Eldar units to make sure that their tournament win rate goes from like 67, 68%, something ridiculous like that, to probably around 50% or less. And that's what I would expect. However, that's not to say that Eldar won't be effective after. We're just going to have to do some adaptation. And the competitive players, most of them, will either move on to the next OP Broken Army, or they will buckle down and find new ways to win. And, you know, most veterans of the game who've been playing Eldar for a long time will find the enjoyment of being able to devise new lists that are still strong. And I, for one, can't wait. And I'm actually going to be doing a video when the balanced data slate comes out, covering this in detail. So, in conclusion, I agree with most of these changes. I think they'll be pretty healthy for the game overall. In fact, I've called for several of these myself over the last month. However, they will probably come alongside severe point hikes, and depending on how those fall, I might have some issues with what GW decides to nerf. Like I said before, if they're nerfing units that aren't currently broken, I will have an issue with that because that's just really lazy game design. So I hope they don't do that, but GW's history is unfortunately not on their side. All right, everybody, that is going to be it for today. Thanks for watching, and thank you to all my patrons and supporters who have supported the channel over the last months. Your help has greatly improved the channel and helped it grow considerably. If you do want to help support the channel, I have free trials activated, which grant you permanent access to our Discord community. And our Discord community is basically just a community of great Eldar players who like to talk about strategy, tactics, and of course hobbying. I will leave the link for that in the description. I also have a channel store page and am an Amazon affiliate, so if you want to grab some Eldar-inspired apparel or discount Eldar miniatures on Amazon, you can go ahead and check out the descriptions for those links as well. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. Peace out. See you guys next time and have some great games this week. Have a good one, everybody. See you later.